In 1982, Microsoft released the first ever version of Microsoft Flight Simulator. And as you can probably already tell just by looking at it, by today's standards, it looks extremely primitive and doesn't exactly sound much better either. However, when you realise that this is a game that came out 3 years before even the first version of Windows did, it kind of puts into perspective just how impressive this actually was for the time. 2 years later in 1984, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2 would be released, and though still clearly extremely primitive, it did at least add some improvements. And such iterative improvements would only continue throughout the rest of the 1980s, with the subsequent releases of Microsoft Flight Simulator 3 and 4. This time, adding actual 3D graphics alongside numerous enhancements. And in the 1990s, starting with 1993's Microsoft Flight Simulator 5, things would only continue to get better. But the real improvements came in Microsoft Flight Simulator 1995, which was a significant upgrade over what came before it in almost every way, solidifying once and for all what a flight simulator really should be. But the real groundbreaking release came in 2006, with the release of Microsoft Flight Simulator 10, which, as you can likely tell just by looking at it, was exactly what people had been waiting for decades. The graphics and flying experience the game provided was, at the time, breathtaking, with it becoming the status quo amateur flight simulator for many years to come. Sadly, however, after the release of Microsoft Flight Simulator 10, over a decade would pass with no sequel in sight, leading many to believe the franchise had long since been abandoned. However, in 2020 the simply titled Microsoft Flight Simulator was released, and needless to say, having spent over a decade in the oven, expectations were high. Question is, would they be met? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to find out today. The last time I went on a flight was all the way back in 2010, when I went to the small Mediterranean Spanish island of Mallorca. Ah yes, a sunny island in the middle of summer. Sounds great. Or so I thought. Little did I know that just as I was about to fly back, a volcano in Iceland would erupt, creating some of the worst conditions to fly in during modern times. So there I was, stuck in Mallorca, with two options before me. Either I spend an extra week on the island until the skies become clearer, which means I'd be paying a ton of cash to the hotel I was staying at, or I risk my life and fly in the most unstable conditions imaginable in order to save a bit of money. So, guess what I decided to do? Yeah. So there I am, in a giant floating metal box in the middle of a volcanic storm, desperately praying that I make it home in one piece. And do you want to know the worst part? I was on Ryanair. Needless to say, it's an absolute miracle that I'm still alive, but I digress. As you can imagine, I haven't really been in the mood to have a flight since that traumatic experience, so I thought that perhaps this flight simulator might whip me back into shape. So let's take a look, shall we? I decided to opt to play this on my Xbox Series S, as it was a part of my Game Pass subscription, and thought, why not? However, it became immediately apparent within the first minute of booting up the game that this is, first and foremost, a PC-focused experience. You ever played a PC game whereby the menus were clearly designed for controllers and weren't friendly to keyboard and mouse inputs? This game is kind of like that, but the opposite. It was clearly designed to be manoeuvred with a mouse and keyboard, as the game uses this weird fake cursor system to navigate menus that is just, to put it bluntly, terrible to use on a controller. It takes a lot of time to get used to, let's put it that way, but alas, complex games require complex controls, and at least there's a lot of options to help you out. A lot of options. So upon getting on the main menu, you are presented with numerous different options. The game kind of guides you to try out what's called Discovery Flights first, whereby you can fly around some well-known places like Mount Everest, the pyramids, the Christ the Redeemer statue, etc, etc. I decided to have my first trip to be Mount Everest, as I was always curious just how tall it actually was. Sadly for me, just as I was about to marvel at the amazing vista that lay before me, within seconds, I crashed. Twice. And that's when I realised that, wait a minute, I don't know how to fly a plane. Yeah, for some reason I went into it thinking that I'd just be able to fly around like I'm playing Saints Row or something like that. But this game doesn't piss around. It's called Flight Simulator for a reason. It simulates actual flight. So, I went back to the main menu and I came across a training school section whereby you can actually learn how to fly without this happening. Why on earth this isn't the first thing the game asks you to do, I don't know. But regardless, it is pretty bloody cool. You have a nice instructor who teaches you the ropes and gives you grades based on how well or terrible you did. And she starts off by teaching you the basics, such as what all the different buttons and dials represent, and after a while you actually start flying the plane, learning how to take off, balance altitude, command the thrust, navigate direction, etc, etc. And no doubt that sounds very intimidating when I put it that way, but really, it isn't. It kind of felt like an ASMR session or something like that, an extremely relaxing learning experience. And after doing lesson after lesson, I found myself quickly becoming a top-notch pilot, if you can believe it. So with my newfound knowledge and confidence, I decided it was time to do my first ever proper flight. Start to finish. Back on the main menu, there is an option simply titled World Map, which originally no doubt sounds laughable. World Map? What, like the entire world? Yeah, right. But no, really, they weren't messing around. You can pick anywhere, and I mean anywhere on Earth, to fly at. Microsoft Flight Simulator actually uses a mix of real satellite imagery, artificial intelligence, and streaming to create a one-to-one lifelike recreation of the entirety of Earth. Quite literally, you have the whole world at your disposal. So, naturally, the place I wanted to do my first proper flight at was my home nation of the United Kingdom. If you know me, then you'll know I'm from the north of England, which is up here, and that I absolutely despise our capital city of London, which is down here. Because I find it to be a snobby, out-of-touch, elitist, messy, smelly, disgraceful, dangerous, crime-filled,
several months later,
disgusting place. So what better route to take for my first flight than to go from London to Manchester? Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to fly. Well, hey, we have liftoff. I won't lie to you folks, flying above the British skyline absolutely blew my mind. I mean, starting off in London and seeing all the garbage modern glass buildings that look about as cosmetically appealing as one of my constipated toilet turds really solidified just how rancid of a city London truly is. However, despite it being the eyesore of Britain, it was still, in its own weird way, an impressive sight to behold. Which, believe me, if a game can get me to say that London is impressive, then you know it's something special. But I'm not going to pretend I wasn't pleased to get out of there so I could enter the countryside shires, which... whoa. Look how absolutely beautiful this looks. You know, from above, I always imagine Britain to look like a giant car park of sorts, because the population is so dense and the island is so small. I mean, we have what, 66, 67 million people? Needless to say, having tens of millions of people on one island is, well, a terrible idea. And so I always believe the reason the average British house looks like a human-sized sardine can is because of this very reason. We don't have a lot of land. However, when you see the country from above, you realise that, no, we have a ton of it. I mean, there's more green than Grove Street down there. Speaking of green, I have to show you just how unnecessarily detailed this simulation actually is. I mean, it's called Flight Simulator for a reason. It's all about flying. You're intended to see the world from above and nothing more. However, if I use the drone camera mode to free roam around, I can actually go down near the ground. And get this, you may expect it to just be a flat texture, right? I mean, after all, it's not like you're ever going to go near it. But shockingly, no, there actually is individual blades of grass down here. I mean, my word, talk about going the extra mile. Sadly, however, roads, buildings and cars are, well, not as impressive up close as you can probably tell here. Yeah, I have no idea what on earth is going on here, but again, it's not as if you're ever meant to be this close to the ground to see such intricate details anyway. Graphical fidelity aside, however, I do wish that the cars weren't foolish enough as to clip into each other like some sort of PS1 game. That is just bad, and believe it or not, it is something you can actually notice, even when up in the air. And by the time I got back home to the north, it was nighttime. As in, seriously nighttime. By default, the game tracks the actual time you're playing and syncs it up in-game. So when it's day in reality, it's day in-game. And when it's night in reality, it's night in-game. Truly amazing stuff that only serves to make the game feel more immersive. But my god, you can't see anything when it's dark. I mean, look, I know Manchester is a dim place where human ambition goes to die, but my word, it's not this bad. Peeking out with the drone down below, you can just barely make out some of the hobbit houses. Fascinating stuff. Overall, I felt like my flight across England was a most pleasurable experience. It is a bit freaky, however, just how realistic and good it actually looks. I mean, as I said earlier, I'm playing this on a £250 Xbox Series S, the weakest of all the current gen consoles. And the fact that £250 worth of hardware can seamlessly deliver an experience this smooth and good looking? I mean, that's just absolutely mind-blowing. On the PC space, you would struggle to find even a decent graphics card for half that price, never mind an entire system. I've said it once and I'll say it again, to my fellow PC gamers, yes, the Xbox One was an absolute embarrassment, a potato of a machine that should still bring Microsoft shame to this day. But the times have changed, and only a fool can deny that at least right now, this isn't an absolute bargain for the price. I mean, Christ, the cherry on top is that I didn't even buy this game. As I said earlier, it was included in my Game Pass subscription. I mean, how someone could possibly pass up on this much value for money, I don't know. I have to say, and this is going to sound somewhat strange, but this game actually made me feel somewhat emotional, if you can believe it. Now I could fly properly, I went back to the Discovery flights to look around to experience such vistas, this time without crashing. And wow. Whether it was Bora Bora, the pyramids, or Rio de Janeiro, I just couldn't believe how good everywhere looked. I mean, look, I'm no fool for graphics, but this is genuinely incredible. Especially when you realise that this is our actual Earth, and in large part, actual satellite imagery. You know, people these days often like to talk about this idea of human progress. I mean, we even have people who label themselves as progressives. But in my opinion, modern day progressivism isn't progress. It's trash. But if you want to see what real human progress looks like, then look no further. This is it. I mean, think about it. In the space of half the average human lifespan, we went from this to this. I mean, how is that even possible? I'm not interested in planes, flight, or anything aviation related of any kind, and I would wager that you probably aren't either. Yet despite that, I bet that you too want to give this a go, just as I did. And the reason for that, I think, is that this game really is more than just that. A game. No. This is a milestone, a showcase of what humanity is capable of when we have the talent, willpower, and finances to back it up. Sounds dramatic, but it's true. This is what real progress looks like. There aren't many reasons to smile these days, especially with how mentally corrupt and morally bankrupt the vast majority of people today are. However, when it comes to the technical side of things, for what it's worth, wow, are we doing a good job. Baffles me to think that if this is possible today, imagine for a moment what will be possible 10, 20 years from now. In all likelihood, we will have the ability to conjure worlds that are almost indistinguishable from our own, which, at the rate we're destroying our actual planet, will probably be a necessity. Either way, however, there's no question that this game truly is a massive technical achievement. I do, however, have one complaint with this game that won't affect 99% of people watching this, but it's annoyed me so much that I feel like adding it in anyway. And that's that editing this has been an absolute pain in the arse. And the reason for that is because usually, whenever I make a review or retrospective or whatever like this, I simply record the gameplay, put it in the editor, put it together, and job done. However, for some reason, my recordings of Microsoft Flight Simulator just weren't that easy. For some reason, all the sound on the recordings was gone, completely gone. I have absolutely no idea why that is. And I could play the recordings back in a media player, but whenever I would try to play them back in my editor, it would instantly crash the editor. And so what I've actually had to do here is I've had to open up the gameplay recordings in a media player and actually record them all again over the media player, just so I can show you them in this video. I've never had a problem like this with any other game, but I gotta say, recording on the Xbox in general is an absolute pain in the arse. This is actually in a way a little bit of a positive, because if you've been watching this and you think, wow, this game looks really good, just keep in mind, you're not seeing the absolute raw gameplay there. First of all, the game has been recorded, which obviously means it's been compressed once, but then I've had to re-record it again, which means it's been compressed twice, but then YouTube also compresses it, which means technically all the gameplay you're watching has been compressed 3 times. So if you think that it looks good here, just imagine how good it's going to look on your TV or monitor when you actually play it yourself. Either way, however, sort it out, Microsoft. My god, you'd think for a game that's as photogenic as this one that you'd have your recording software sorted out for it, but clearly not. But you know, I really couldn't just leave it there. I mean, if you can go anywhere on Earth, well, there's a lot of places I want to go. So I thought I'd test the limits of what's possible on the sim by going to 3 of the most dangerous places on the planet and seeing how the simulation actually represents them. Starting with North Korea. I took a flight from Seoul, South Korea, directly to Pyongyang, North Korea. And here you can see me crossing the border into the north, which, I have to say, looks shockingly pretty nice. I mean, we often imagine North Korea being this grey dystopian concrete jungle, but we have to remember that the vast majority of the country is just verdant green farmland. I mean, damn, I'd be tempted to move here myself if it really looks this beautiful. Oh yeah, never mind. On the way to Pyongyang, I came across numerous different little North Korean villages and towns. At least, I hope that's what these are. The houses kind of look very low poly, like a game from the mid-90s or something, as if they're made of cardboard. Which, I have to say, would be a very realistic simulation of North Korea, as did you know that over there, they actually have villages of cardboard houses on the border, in order to look like they're way more prosperous than they actually are. I'm not joking with you, look it up. But as impressive as the simulation is, it certainly isn't flawless. Here you can see where the satellite imagery has been stitched together very shoddily. Granted, it is rare to notice stuff like this, but still, when you do, it can be quite immersion breaking. Granted, we are also in North Korea, so it's not like I expected some crystal clear imagery or anything like that. I also came across this strange giant mountain that kind of looks like it's made of mint ice cream. No idea what on earth is going on here at all, but it genuinely looks alien. And yummy. I tell you, there really is a lot of weird stuff you can find when looking around this map. I actually prefer looking around than actually flying, if I'm being honest with you. Regardless, however, eventually I finally reached Pyongyang, which, I have to say, was way smaller than I thought it would be. Granted, everywhere looks small when you're up hundreds of thousands of miles in the air, but damn, this is one tiny city. Here you can see the world-famous Pyongyang Stadium, which up until recently used to be the largest in the entire world. It's been modelled both on the inside and out, and yeah, it's a pretty interesting place, to say the least. Apart from that, however, there really ain't much else to see. There's this odd tower here that I don't recognise in the slightest, as well as a bunch of very bizarre-looking Soviet-style block buildings that are way too close together. Yeah, these look less like buildings and more like the motherboard of a computer. I can't imagine this is accurate. Then again, with North Korea, you never know. Decided to go down and walk around Pyongyang from a person's perspective, which, though clearly made the city feel much larger, didn't really make it any less depressing. I mean, to be honest, this looks like any council estate here in Britain. A shame the simulation isn't more accurate or detailed in this regard, but hey, there's only so much they can do, I suppose. Oh, and here's the city at night time, and as you can see, oh, well, actually, I guess that's the entire point. You can't really see much. Either way, North Korea, great countryside, depressing city. We're not too different, you and I. The next place I wanted to visit was, of course, Area 51. Ah yes, Area 51, the place where the American government has apparently been hiding half the cast of Mass Effect for the last 40 years. However, as I was looking for Area 51 in the barren wastes of the Nevada desert, I ended up finding an extremely weird discovery. I came across these weird looking circles on the map that looked almost like crop circles or something like that. Decided to have a fly around there to investigate, and what the hell is this? Yeah, I have absolutely no idea. Just a bunch of weird circles. I mean, I don't know what else I'm meant to say. I just discovered them completely accidentally, slap bang in the middle of nowhere. Very strange. But here's the thing, I didn't just find them once. No, I found them multiple times, again and again, in the middle of nowhere. I really just have no explanation for it at all. I mean, this place here, as you can see, there's an absolute ton of them. It looks like something straight out of Half-Life 2 or something like that, like some sort of combine alphabet. I have no idea. But eventually, I found what I was looking for, Area 51. Which, in comparison to the giant crop circles, was pretty boring, if I'm being honest. It's just a bunch of buildings and, sand. I did at least come across this guy here, though, who must be a government worker of sorts. Hey buddy, do you have any aliens here? That's a no. Now, I for one have never believed for a second that there's alien life in Area 51, and it's for a very simple reason. Wouldn't it make a lot of sense to make a base and then purposely spread a myth that there's aliens there, so that the public focuses all on that one base, when in reality, you hide the aliens not in Area 51, but Area 52. Ooh. Galaxy brain. Back in the day when I used to piss around on Google Maps, I noticed something that caught my eye. Greenland. One of the largest countries and islands in the world, but no one ever talks about it. Mostly as there's only like a handful of people who actually live there, and because it's 99% made of snow. But still, land is land. Years ago, I noticed that Greenland had a ton of satellite imagery that had clearly been edited, and I've always believed that the reason for that is to obscure the fact that the United States has secret scientific/military bases hidden in Greenland. And so, in the search of Area 52, that is exactly where we're going to go next. Greenland. Wasn't honestly sure what to expect from Greenland, but this definitely wasn't it. Just an endless sea of ice. Well, at least I think it's ice. To be honest, it looks more like moon rock or something like that. It's clear to me that, unlike the rest of the game, this isn't real satellite imagery. It just looks like the same repeating texture over and over again ad infinitum. Kind of reminds me of a level editor when you haven't actually added anything yet. Just an endless floor, a barren wasteland, far away from civilization. Either way, I hung around for quite a while, but in the end, Area 52 escaped me. Maybe next time. Overall, Microsoft Flight Simulator is a game that everyone should experience at least once in their life, even if just for a few hours. While it can take quite some time to learn how to be a pilot, when you do, you're in for a real treat. Having the freedom to go wherever you want is an absolutely mind-blowing experience. Though admittedly it isn't something I'd play for hours on end, there's no denying that this game is beyond impressive, both on a technical and ambitious level. And regardless of my personal thoughts or sentiments, for that reason alone does it deserve high praise and recognition.